Hi, it's Miss Lisa from the St. Paris Public Library. Today's Anytime story is titled The Worst Volcanic Eruptions of All Time.
Eruption. Right now, somewhere in the world, a volcano is erupting. In fact, there are most likely 20 volcanoes erupting as you read this. A volcano is a vent in Earth's surface that lets magma and hot gas escape. Once the magma reaches the surface, it is called lava. Volcanoes come in different shapes and sizes. They exist on land and underwater. Some eruptions kill thousands of people, while others kill no one. Eruptions can last one day or hundreds of years. The strength of an eruption is measured by the Volcanic Explosivity Index, VEI. Ratings are based on the size and force of the eruption. The weakest eruptions are given a value of 0. The strongest eruptions in history have been given a rating of 8. However, a volcano doesn't have to rate high on the VEI to have a powerful impact on human life. Magma, melted rock that is found underneath the earth. Lava, the hot liquid rock that pours out of a volcano when it erupts. Basic types of volcano. A shield volcano is shaped like a warrior's shield. It is much wider than it is tall. It is formed by hardened lava flow. A cinder cone volcano has gently sloping peaks formed by fallen ash from previous eruptions. Most cinder cone volcanoes are shorter than 1,000 feet. A lava dome is formed by lava that is too thick to flow. Domes grow from the inside, often in the craters or on the sides of larger composite volcanoes. A composite volcano has steep sides formed by layers of ash and lava. It looks like a mountain and can reach up to 8,000 feet high. These volcanoes are also called stratovolcanoes. Fact: a caldera is a large bowl-shaped crater at the top of the volcano. A caldera forms after an eruption causes a volcano to collapse. Many calderas are filled with water and look like lakes. The death cloud. People from the island city of St. Pierre on Martinique thought they had little to fear from Mount Pelée. They had lived in its shadow for more than 200 years without a problem. Then one evening in 1902, Mount Pelée erupted with a powerful force. In the morning, a super-hot cloud of ash and rock formed in the sky. Part of the cloud separated and sped down the volcano at about 100 miles per hour. It became known as a death cloud. As it moved to the sea, the cloud lit ships on fire. St. Pierre stood in the cloud's path. The cloud was strong enough to pull down heavy statues. A blanket of burning ash settled on the ground as it passed. The eruption of Mount Pelée was the deadliest of the century. Experts think 28,000 to 36,000 people died. The death cloud eruption helped start the modern science of volcanology. Scientists hope to save lives by learning more about volcanoes and predicting their behavior. Volcanology, the study of volcanoes. Fact: the death cloud in the Mount Pelée eruption is also called a pyroclastic flow. A pyroclastic flow is a dense, extremely hot cloud of gas, steam, ash, and rock. An expensive eruption. It was March 1980. After 123 years of silence, Mount St. Helens began to stir. Thousands of small earthquakes rocked the volcano. One side began to swell up. Finally, on May 18th, a strong eruption caused ash, rock, and gas to spew sideways from the mountain. The ash, rock, and gas traveled at speeds of at least 300 miles per hour. An enormous cloud, about 15 miles tall, spread out above the volcano. Pieces of ash in the cloud rubbed against one another, creating electrical charges. The charges formed flashes of lightning and sparked forest fires. 2 inches of ash covered a nearby town. More than 200 homes and 185 miles of road were destroyed. Fact: during the 1980 eruption, the peak of Mount St. Helens blew off. Afterward, the mountain was 1,313 feet shorter. The Mount St. Helens eruption was very powerful, but only 57 people died. Few people lived near the volcano. Also, volcanologists predicted Mount St. Helens would experience volcanic activity. Because of the advanced warning, most people left before the eruption. Mount St. Helens is the most expensive volcanic eruption in U.S. history. The eruption caused $1 billion in damage to the surrounding areas. Buried under ash. Almost 2,000 years ago, Pompeii and Herculaneum were two successful cities in Italy. They were at the foot of Vesuvius, a large mountain. The soil was good for farming, and the mountain seemed peaceful. An earthquake hit the two cities in the 1st century. Over time, more earthquakes rocked the ground. Today, scientists know that earthquakes often come before volcanic eruptions. However, it's likely that no one living at that time knew that Vesuvius would erupt. Gas and ash spewed from the volcano. The wind carried some of the gas and ash to Pompeii. The ash rained from the sky. The ash blocked out the sun, creating total darkness. The worst was still to come. Burning flows of hot ash and gas rolled out of the volcano. Pompeii and Herculaneum were completely destroyed. Herculaneum was buried by about 75 feet of volcanic debris. An estimated 25,000 people died. The shape of people who died were preserved underground beneath thick layers of ash. Eruption of Vesuvius. The eruption of Vesuvius is the oldest volcanic eruption with a written eyewitness account. This comes from a man named Pliny the Younger, who watched the eruption from a nearby town. He wrote, "A dense black cloud was coming up behind us, spreading over the earth like a flood. Ashes began to fall again, this time in heavy showers. We rose from time to time and shook them off, otherwise we should have been buried and crushed beneath their weight. At last the darkness thinned and dispersed. We were terrified to see everything changed, buried deep in ash, like snowdrifts. People poured plaster onto the holes left in the ash. The plaster cast showed the outlines of human bodies." Fact: when ash and lava mix with dirt, the soil becomes rich and good for farming. As a result, people throughout history have lived near volcanoes. A preventable tragedy. The Nevada del Ruiz eruption in 1985 pitted hot against cold. At its summit, Nevada del Ruiz was covered with snow and ice, but the frozen peak quickly disappeared with an eruption on November 13th. The summit melted and created deep flows of muddy debris called lahars. The lahars swept down the volcano and rushed across the land. Just before midnight, mud and debris rushed into the nearby town of Armero. More than 20,000 people were killed. A Colombian geology student described the event. "There was total darkness. The only light was provided by cars. We were running and were about to reach the corner when a river of water came down the streets. Looking towards the rear of the hotel, I saw something like foam coming down out of the darkness. It was a wall of mud approaching the hotel." Volcanologists had warned about a possible disaster. They said an eruption and mud flows from Nevada del Ruiz was likely. Earthquakes had shaken the area for years, but the leaders of Armero weren't convinced. They didn't want to evacuate the town unless an eruption would definitely occur. The lack of an official warning system and emergency response made Nevada del Ruiz a very deadly eruption. More than a volcano. Before Mount Pinatubo erupted, it had been dormant for about 600 years. Then from March into June in 1991, thousands of small earthquakes hit the area. Steam and gas slowly erupted from the volcano. Then one day in the middle of June, gas and ash formed a mushroom cloud as wide as the state of California. The cloud was so big it blocked out the sun. The same day, Typhoon Yunya arrived with heavy rain and strong winds. The ash turned into a substance like wet concrete. The heavy material caused roofs to collapse. Rivers running down the volcano became lahars that surged across the land. Piles of debris left behind were as deep as 650 feet. Despite the destruction, only 300 people died. Scientists and local officials had learned a lesson from the eruption of Nevada del Ruiz. They moved more than 75,000 people to safety before the eruption. Fact: Mount Pinatubo is part of a large chain of volcanoes around the Pacific Ocean. This chain is known as the Ring of Fire. The Decade-Long Eruption. Did you know that the entire state of Hawaii is made up of volcanoes? 5 volcanoes form the Big Island of Hawaii. Of these 5, Kilauea is the most active. The Kilauea eruption that began in 1983 registered only a 1 on the VEI. But Kilauea has been erupting ever since. The lava flows have covered more than 24,700 acres. Hundreds of people have been forced to leave their homes. Those that stay must be on their alert for volcanic activity. One resident said, "Even though we are used to the volcanic dangers and know how to respond, that doesn't make it easier." Because Kilauea is easy to get to, scientists are able to study the island closely. Volcanologists can monitor the volcanic activity safely from different areas of the volcano, even the caldera. That's why Kilauea is one of the most studied volcanoes in the world. Because of its long-lasting eruption, it also may be the most active volcano on Earth. The 1850 eruption of Mount Tambora started quietly. Between 1812 and 1815, Tambora released clouds of steam and caused minor earthquakes. April 1815 marked the end of the volcano's quiet rumblings. Several huge explosions blew the volcano's peak apart. One witness described columns of flames and rocks as large as the head. Ash and pumice filled the sky and blocked out the sun. The eruption was so strong that dust and ash circled the planet several times. As a result, less sunlight reached Earth. The average world temperature dropped several degrees. The eruption led to bad storms, flooding, and ruined crops, which caused famine and disease. Some regions even got frost and snow in the summer. That's why some people call 1816 the year without a summer. At least 80,000 people around the world died from starvation and disease. Scientists believe this is the highest death toll of any volcanic eruption. Fact: during the Tambora eruption, several famous writers were on vacation in Switzerland. The bad weather kept them inside, where they worked on writing stories. Mary Shelley wrote her famous novel Frankenstein during that stay. The loudest sound in history. In 1883, 3 mountain cones jutted up from the sea in Indonesia. The cones were the tips of a partly underwater volcano called Krakatau. In May 1883, one of the cones began to spew dust and ash. It didn't seem dangerous. Tourists came in boats to watch the activity, but they didn't realize the risks they were taking. On August 26, 1883, Krakatau erupted in one of the biggest volcanic explosions ever recorded. The eruption was heard more than 3,000 miles away. It has been called the loudest sound in history. The resulting ash covered 300,000 square miles. In some places, the debris was up to 200 feet deep. The eruption lasted 2 days and ended in a stunning moment. The volcano split apart. Most of it sank under the ocean. No one lived on Krakatau, so few people died right away. However, when the volcano collapsed, it caused huge tsunamis. Some were 14 stories tall. The tsunami slammed into Indonesia and other islands, killing more than 30,000 people. Tsunami, a large destructive wave caused by an earthquake, volcanic eruption, or landslide. A scar left behind. In 1792, a volcanic eruption in Japan started a chain reaction of destruction. A lava dome erupted on the side of Mount Unzen. The eruption sparked a landslide. Mud and debris crashed through the city of Shimabara, Japan. The eruption also caused a tsunami in the Araki Sea. The tsunami traveled 43 miles along the coast. It wiped out almost 6,000 homes. More than 14,000 people died as a result of the eruption, landslide, and tsunami. This makes Unzen one of the most destructive volcanic eruptions in history. In 1991, after almost 200 years of silence, Unzen erupted again. However, warning systems and evacuation plans saved thousands of lives. 43 people died in 1991 eruption. Unzen is still a threat to people in Japan. The path of the 1792 landslide appears as a scar and a reminder of the volcanoes sighted today. An ancient eruption. The ancient eruption of the Yellowstone caldera is hard to imagine. Proclastic flows rushed through what is now Wyoming and nearby states. Volcanic ash fell across the land that today makes up the whole country. Some scientists think the Yellowstone eruption was 1,000 to 2,500 times stronger than the eruption of Mount St Helens. Today, the United States would have trouble surviving a similar eruption. Huge earthquakes would shatter windows 300 miles away. Ash and debris would cloud the sky, causing total darkness for days. Pyroclastic flows would destroy farms and towns. The global temperature would drop. Scientists estimate that the Yellowstone caldera erupts every 600,000 to 800,000 years. Another explosion is possible in the near future. However, scientists don't think a major eruption will happen for several thousand years. Fact: the Yellowstone caldera is located in what is now Yellowstone National Park. Some of the biggest attractions in the park are geysers, including the famous Old Faithful. The geysers are created when water mixes with magma underground. The biggest eruption in history. Can you imagine living in darkness for days at a time? That's what happened during the Toba eruption, one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions in human history. Like Yellowstone, it had a VEI of 8. However, some scientists think the Toba eruption was twice as big as Yellowstone eruption. The Toba eruption had a big impact on the world. The hovering dust and ash caused the region to be completely dark for weeks. 6 years passed before all the ash in the air settled to the ground. The eruption changed the weather, caused water shortages, and ruined crops. Half the trees in the northern part of the world died. Some scientists believe the Toba eruption caused the human race to shrink to about 15,000 people. The Toba eruption was a powerful volcanic eruption, but scientists don't believe we will experience such an extreme eruption anytime soon. Fact: both Toba and the Yellowstone caldera are sometimes called supervolcanoes. A supervolcano can cause a VEI of 8 eruption. This type of eruption can change the whole planet's weather. Living with volcanoes. Many people in the past were surprised by volcanic eruptions, but we aren't as lucky to be surprised today. Scientists now have many tools to study volcanoes. They are able to predict when a volcano is likely to erupt. People often have more time to move to safe areas. If you live near an active volcano, here are some tips to help you stay safe. Find out how your local government has prepared for an eruption. Ask local officials how they will notify the community if the volcano becomes dangerous. Listen to the radio for emergency broadcast. Have an emergency plan in case of an eruption. Your family should decide where to go if you are told to evacuate. Keep a supply of food and water on hand. Store dust masks and goggles to protect against falling ash. Be sure there are enough for each person in your family. Make a disaster kit that includes batteries, flashlights, blankets, and a first aid kit. The U.S. Geological Survey studies volcanoes in the United States. The USGS scientists take readings near volcanoes and measure the level of volcanic activity. If they think a volcano is becoming dangerous, they use an alert system to warn people. The USGS also has a team of scientists that responds to volcanic threats around the world.